Good evening, guys. Hope you're doing well. Good news. This is the last time we'll have to do this, at least unless there's some unforeseen circumstance that causes us to have to do it in the future. But plan is, with the new job I'm starting, that we won't have to do this again. So um, we'll get into it. Amber informed me that last week was very painful. So I've got a PowerPoint this time that I'm going off of. You guys obviously don't have to look at, um, but hopefully it'll keep me on track. And I know last week or 2 weeks ago or whenever it was, I was very around the everything. I was tired. I was after work, so hopefully I'll be a bit better for you this week. May actually say something that is helpful. We'll see. First thing though is um, bookkeeping type world. We are planning to do the escape room and out to eat and all that on the 21st of March. Um, Adriana and Riley, if you're there, you guys know I reached out to your dad, well, to Chad, to see if you guys were good. He said he thought you guys were. And then Peyton reached out to you. Anyone else is in the room because I'm not there and I can't see. Hopefully the 21st works for you. Um, we can talk about it if not. But hopefully we'll have a date finalized if it's not the 21st by next week so they can put it in the bulletin and everyone who is not regularly in our class can plan to come. Feel free to invite your friends from school. Don't care if they've never been to the church before. We've got plenty of money to foot for them. And that'll be a good way to get them exposed to the group and hopefully get them coming to the group. That way we can not just teach you guys about Jesus, but teach more people about Jesus. So that's the goal. That's the hope. If someone wants to pause me so they can pray to get into it, um, I'm not going to call anybody out, but Amber has authority to do so if she would like. Other than that, if you guys want to turn the Bibles that I know you have to Daniel chapter 3, we are in Daniel chapter 3. If you guys want to also review the verse of the month or whatever it is, the verse of however many weeks it takes us to get through the month that the book is calling the month. It's 1 John chapter 1 verse 9. 1 John was written by John the disciple, not the Gospel of John, which talks about Jesus' life, but one of his letters to the churches that he helped get off the ground. And I could say it wrong, but I'm going to try it. So if we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us of all unrighteousness. I promise I'm not looking at it. I've got my PowerPoint and Daniel over here. But feel free to learn that. It's not that bad. And I don't know, we'll buy you a candy bar or something if you're able to learn it by the end of whatever this segment is. And not the little candy bars either, king size. Good stuff. But anyway, if you are in Daniel 3, it's got it separated into 3 sections. So we're going to read verse 1 through 12, talk about it. Then we're going to read verse 13 through 23, talk about it, and then verse 24 through 30. We'll have some reading, talking about what's actually going on in the passage, and then have some points to talk about. Then hopefully we'll get through it and actually finish the lesson by the time you guys are ready to leave. Amber said we didn't quite get there last week, so it's my bad. I'm talkative, you guys know that. And I ramble especially when I'm awkward and on a camera instead of in person and awkward. But so if you guys want to read, that's cool. You can just fast forward to when I'm done reading. Otherwise, I'll read it. So chapter 3, verse 1 says, Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold whose height was 60 cubits and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. And he set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. That means it was about 60 cubits tall, which is 60 is 20, right? 7 years ago, as Abe Lincoln said. Anyways, so 60 cubits, which is 60 times 18 inches divided by 12 inches for feet, however tall that is, by 6 feet or 6 cubits wide. So it was real tall, real narrow, just so everybody could see it, right? Probably an image of one of Nebuchadnezzar's gods. Could have been an image of himself. It doesn't clarify, but I feel like if it was an image of himself, it would have said so. Verse 2 says, Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image of Nebuchadnezzar that the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up, and they stood up before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. If you remember from last week, if we got there, I don't know, Daniel and his friends were in this group of people, especially after Daniel had told the king what the dream meant, right? They promoted Daniel, promoted his friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or Azariah, Mishael, and whatever the other guy's name was in Hebrew. Can't remember. But it's in chapter something, 1-ish of Daniel, so if you want to look it up. Anyway, so they're all gathered together at this dedication of whatever this idolatrous image is, right? It's not of God. We do know that. So then a herald, this is verse 4, cried aloud, To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. And whoso falleth not down and worshippeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Furnaces obviously were for like smelting metal, smelting metal, which is melting it down, right? For whatever reason, whether it's to scoop off bad stuff, whether it's to reshape it, whether it's literally just to burn stuff. Anyway, a furnace is a hot place. Apparently, this one was one that they could walk into or be cast into. But I think this is a good point to stop here and say what key truth the book would like us to gather from this section. And that is following the one true God. That means God the Father, our God, right? Following the one true God might put us in the minority. And it says might, but I will say will put us in the minority in the world. I suppose if you're at church worshiping God, you're not in the minority, but in general, you will be in the minority of people. So we'll keep going. Verse 7, Therefore at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Wherefore at that time, certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. They spake and said to the king, Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound, man, this chapter is very repetitive on its lists, of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Kicker here. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image that thou hast set up. So, setting the scene, basically, they go in to this plain of Dura, whatever that means, whether it's just a big open field, whether there's different thoughts. Either way, there's this giant golden image set up, right? This giant golden idol, and this music plays, and everyone's supposed to bow down and worship this idol. The music goes off, everyone bows down and worships the idol, except at least Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And you can imagine how they're going to stick out like a sore thumb, right? In church, you can get away with it, right? Because they'll say, oh, stand and pray, and everybody will stand up except for 2 or 3, but there's people standing up, so you can't see them. It's the opposite. So they say everybody bows, and these people are still standing up, right? So these Chaldeans, it says, that means people from Babylon, certain people from Babylon, go to King Nebuchadnezzar and they say, hey, I don't know if you noticed or not, but these Jews that you've got in power are setting a bad example, and they're not following your command to worship the image you set up. So that's how the story starts. The next section has one of my favorite quotes in all of the Bible in it. So bonus points to whoever can figure out what that is. I'll probably tell you when we get there, but bonus points if you can find out before I tell you. But before we go on, there's a few questions we'll discuss. So Amber, if you want to pause me after I read the question, and then y'all can discuss it, and then I might talk about it, or I might just move on. I guess we'll see. Question 1, what are some gods, ideas, or practices our culture wants us to bow down to today? So essentially we're talking about things that are culturally important that may not be biblically important, right? And I hope you guys came up with some good examples because I'm currently blanking. So usually it's things that are popular in social medias nowadays, whether it's certain clothes, whether it's going to the party scenes, whether it's going to the bars as an adult, right? Those are things you're supposed to do, and if you don't do them, you kind of look weird, right? And that's what this is hinting at. Things that if you don't participate or if you don't worship at that altar, as they would say, people are going to think you're different, think you're strange, think you're weird, think you're a loser, whatever it might be. Next question. Feel free to discuss this as strongly as you like or as weakly as you like. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt pressure to bow down to something wrong? So basically, same question, but where you felt personally pressured to do such a thing. And the final question, is it easier or harder to stand for what you believe when you have friends around you that believe the same way? What if they believe differently? So when I was a kid, this is way back when, I went to a birthday party. I was like, I don't know, 8, 9, 10, maybe. Couldn't have been much older than that. Went to his kid's birthday party. His older brother was home. Me and none of these kids went in there, and he pulled a bottle of Jack out of his upper drawer of his dresser, the older brother did, and was offering it to uh, the little kids, which is crazy to me. But I was very sheltered as a little kid, so I was just like shocked. Fortunately, young Derek had the wherewithal to call his mom and dad, and I went home. This is before cell phones, by the way, so I had to get the house phone. I had to get the house phone and call home. And truthfully, young Derek was better about that, I think. As Derek grew up, it got harder. So you guys are probably in the midst of it being the hardest it's ever going to be, because the pressure to fit in for y'all is so much stronger than it is for little kids. And by the time you get my age, you don't care, right? So fitting in doesn't matter to me, as you can tell, because I don't. So the point of this last question, it's a lot easier to maintain your beliefs, your faith, to stand up for what you believe in if you're surrounded by those people, right? If you've got 17 people around you telling you to do something wrong, it's a lot easier to fall into that than it is if you've got 17 people around you telling you to do stuff that's right. I don't know why I did 17, but it's a good number. All right, moving on. And the key truth that wants us here, following the one true God might cost us. So the first one said, following the one true God might put us in the minority. And now it's clarifying that suddenly, following this one true God might cost us something. So, picking up in verse 13. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods, nor worship the golden image that I have set up? Now, if you be ready, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the image which I have made, well. But if you worship not, you shall be cast in the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Nebuchadnezzar, which we haven't seen much of yet because last week was very miserable and you didn't get much of anything probably, is very prideful, super duper. At one point he gets basically He doesn't morph into a cow, but he starts behaving like an animal and goes out and just eats grass, and it's terrible. Just as proud as they come, right? So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego come in. He's like, "Is it true that you're not worshiping the image that I set up?" He's like, "You know what? I'm gonna give you one more chance. When you hear the music, you bow down and you worship that image. But if not, what God is going to deliver you from me?" Right? Putting his own power above the power of gods. And he believes in multiple gods, right? Nebuchadnezzar does. So quite bold, truthfully. Verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter." Basically, we're not going to mince words here, is what they're saying. "If it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up." So basically, they're like, yes, we did not do that. And also, just to be perfectly clear, our God definitely could deliver us from your hands. And even if he doesn't, we're still not going to worship that image you set up. That was one of my favorite quotes, by the way, the one I referenced earlier. Just a lot of boldness there, and it's awesome. So, verse 19, then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Basically means he was so angry, his opinion of them was different. He went from like wanting them to be rulers over his people to wanting to kill them, right? Pretty big shift. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated, meaning 7 times more than it was usually heated. In the Hebrew Bible, anytime you see 7, it's, although yes, sometimes literally means 7, but often just means like a complete shift. As hot as possible is what it's saying. And he commanded that the most mighty men that were in his army bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Not only did he want them to be thrown in, he wanted them to be tied up to where they couldn't get loose and then thrown in. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So, cliffhanger, bum bum bum. You've probably heard the story though, so it's not all that exciting. But basically, Nebuchadnezzar says, throw them into the fire, make it as hot as possible. And I want my strongest men to tie them up so they can't get loose if they were able to. Unfortunately, those strongest men of his army, as they were throwing them into the fire, either A, fell in themselves, or B, and that's how it describes it, the fire was so hot that those people that were trying to throw them in died doing so. Oh, the fire's about to turn on. Speaking of, right on cue. Kind of funny. Anyway, so a few questions regarding that section. Why do unbelievers often react strongly when believers stand up for godly principles instead of joining in sinful practices? Pause to discuss. My opinion is that it's just so normal for people to go with the flow, right? To swim with everybody else, right? When you go against the grain, swim against the flow, whatever metaphor you want to use, people are like, wait a second, he said what? It just catches them, right? And that's a good thing, because anytime you can get people to think you're different, they want to know why you're different. Now, if you're just different because you're like mean and obnoxious, that's not the same thing. But so the 3 Hebrews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, decided to follow God even if he did not save them. How difficult would that be to imitate? So for my own personal life, I found standing in front of a gun is not all that easy, even though you might think it is. So like getting into a situation, you might have this opinion of how you're going to act, but when you're actually in the situation, it's that much more difficult. So this is a tricky question. I would like to think gung ho for God, They can hold a gun up to me and I would still say the same things, right? That's what happened at Columbine. You guys are too young for that, but there's a mass high school shooting. The first person they killed, they shot her, and then they said, basically, where's your Jesus now, more or less, and she confessed Christ still yet, and they shot her again and killed her. But until you're in the situation, it's hard to tell, right? So the answer is it's extremely difficult to do what these Hebrew children, they call them the 3 Hebrew children. They're not kids at this point. I don't know why they say that. Very difficult to do what they did, but it's what we should do. Very difficult, but what we should do. Actually, Chris probably has this book if you want to ask him. There's a book called Fox's Book of Martyrs. It's basically just a church history book that talks about people who were martyred over the years and their story. I've not read it. I need to, so I need to get that from him. But if you want unbelievable, true, encouraging, difficult to imitate stories of people standing for what they believe in, that would be the way to go. Next question. Our culture often talks about canceling people with whom they don't agree, especially recently. Should Christians fear being canceled? Why or why not? Expect, I would say. I would say expect being canceled. Don't fear being canceled, because people aren't going to like what you have to say about a lot of things. And we need to present things in certain ways, right? We obviously believe denominationally and traditionally that homosexuality is a sin, right? Unfortunately, we have so strongly stood on just that point that we've presented hatred towards those people for so many years, right? And those people need salvation just as much as we do, right? So we need to be careful not to focus so strongly on a certain sin that we ignore other ones. First problem. And second problem, we need to be careful that we're not condemning people without presenting the hope that we have, right? Because we all came from some background of sin, right? No one was born without sin. Sorry about your luck. So we all have to. We've all had that. If we're with Christ, we've all had that saving grace placed on our life. So we need to present that as such. Last question. Where can we find encouragement when the world attacks our faith? How does this show the importance of being part of a local church? Pause for discussion. I'm saying that just in case we forgot to pause. So for example, I'm not going to name names, but it's probably obvious. I have seen how some of y'all interact with some of the other members of the church, and I think that is just awesome. The amount of love that they have for you and the amount of love you have for them is encouraging to me. The fact that you have those people that you can talk to if you ever need someone to talk to, you're not going to have that without being part of a church, right? You don't technically need a church to be saved, right? But if you don't have one, you don't have that community around you to give you encouragement, that community around you to keep you strong when you're struggling, and just to give you support when you need it. So stay with the church. All right, final section. We're trying to get through it. I don't know how much. I don't know where we're at, but hopefully we're close. Choosing to be true to God is a witness to those around us. That's the last key truth they've got. So we had serving God might put us in the minority, or will put us in the minority. Serving God might cost us, if that's God's will. And choosing to be true to God is a witness to those around us, meaning it shows them something. All right, final section of the chapter. Starting in verse 24. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished. Astonished is another word. I don't know why it says astonished in Old King James, but it's fine. And rose up in haste and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. Nebuchadnezzar sees something. He says, Wait a second. We only put 3 people in there, right? They say, He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose and walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. Other versions will say son of the gods. Regardless, of how you translate it. He looks in, instead of seeing the 3 people he threw in on their face because they're bound in ropes or whatever they're bound in, right? He sees 4 people standing up in the fire and walking around not being hurt by it. And one of them looks especially divine, whether he was shining or just had a glory about him, we don't really know. Most theologians would say this was a Christophany, meaning an appearance of Christ in the Old Testament. Could have been an angel, could have been anything, as long as it's divine and protecting protecting the 3 Hebrews, right? So, verse 26, then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth out of the midst of the fire. I find it so interesting that they just chilled in the furnace until Nebuchadnezzar told them to come out. Like, they were accepting their punishment. They're just chilling in the fire like, oh, well, we didn't follow the king's command, so here we are. And then all of a sudden the king says, hey, guys, come here. And they're like, oh, good. Thought we were going to stay in here forever. They come out, right? So he comes out, and and the princes, the governors, the captains, the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was a hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Also note that whoever this 4th being was in the fire doesn't come out of the fire, right? Oh, I said out of the fire and it turned off. So cool. Anyway, that's just a thermostat, not magic. So, nothing was wrong with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Their clothes were fine. Their hairs weren't burnt. If you guys have ever gotten too close to fire, you know your hair burns pretty easy, right? None of that was a problem. They didn't even smell like smoke, he said. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel, and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their house shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So basically, King Nebuchadnezzar sees this happen and completely changes his tone, right? He calls them back out. He's like, you guys are fine. Nothing's wrong. And then they're probably like, yeah, we told you that. And then he's like, okay, well, anyone who says anything bad about your God, kill them and burn their house down, because I don't want to mess with that guy, right? You could read this to say, oh, Nebuchadnezzar now believes in Yahweh and he's converted to belief in the Hebrew God. Realistically, it's more likely that he just saw the power of the God that we serve and didn't want to offend him, right? So he's trying to preserve himself, more or less. But yeah, that's the story. The fact that they chose not to worship the image, when they were confronted about it, doubled down and said they were never going to worship an image that was idolatrous to God, took their punishment, went into the furnace, trusted that God would deliver them. God did deliver them, and that was a witness to everyone around them. The other princes, the other governors, the king himself, anyone who saw and heard about it, us nowadays reading about it, right? So your actions and your standing up for God has a lasting effect, right? All right, last questions. I'll close my Bible. When things are bad, when bad things are happening, why is it so difficult to stand, just chill, and leave the results to God? How might others be encouraged by our unwavering faith in those circumstances, right? So when you're going through chronic illness, when someone's in a house fire, right, and you see them trusting God rather than wallowing in pity, right? Rather than all hope is lost, they say, I don't understand what's going on, but I know that God's brought me through it and is bringing me through it, right? Those stories are encouraging to us. They are to me. I don't read them a lot because I don't like reading a lot of Facebook posts, but seeing them, hearing about them, it's astounding to see how some people, and again, that Book of Martyrs thing has a lot of these, how some people have been able to trust God um, through just some crazy things. How can our lifestyle and choices be a witness for the Lord? Pause to discuss and basically just recap the lesson as a whole. So yeah, like we've been talking, when you do something that people don't expect you to do, they take notice. That can take any sort of form, but when it stands up for our God, it hopefully sparks some curiosity and sparks some questions and sparks some conversations. So after you do something to stand up for our God, although he doesn't need you to have his back per se, right? Be prepared to have those conversations, right? Be prepared to explain why you trust in God. All right. Give examples of choices that would serve as a witness to those around us. Y'all are in high school, right? So the easiest one, talking to the people nobody talks to, right? Not being afraid to introduce yourself to the new kid, right? One, that will be a witness to the person you're talking to because they're like, wait, why are you talking to me? And two, it's a witness to everyone else because they're like, wait, why are you talking to him or her? And does that put you on the outside? Maybe, but we said it might, right? Serving God may put us in the minority. Other things, right? If someone's being bullied, telling your friends to stop bullying them, right? If I don't know, everybody's throwing back shots, and you know that's a bad idea. Don't do that, kind of a thing. Basically, anything that is contrary to what the world expects and is supportive of a lifestyle that is being led by the Spirit of God will raise eyebrows. So don't be afraid to do that because it's a good thing. Yeah. Anyway, if no one, I think I said it, but if no one caught it, the my favorite quote for your bonus points that don't matter for anything, just like on Whose Line Is It Anyway, was where they told the king, our God will deliver us, and if he doesn't, we're not serving your gods anyway. Paraphrased. I think it's cool. Questions, comments, snide remarks, I can't ask them, so hopefully Amber can. If not, she'll write them down for me, and I can answer them later. And then don't forget, 27th for our trip. Make sure that works for you. Make sure you sign up. Hopefully we'll make a sign-in sheet or something. I don't know. And then 1 John 1:9. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Not too bad. Y'all can do it. I believe in you. Free king-size candy bar to everybody who does. See you guys next week. Hopefully we're not all buried in snow and I'll actually be in person. Be able to use that fancy new whiteboard we got. See you guys.